So I guess we're gonna go right now to Ashe. And I'm gonna let her introduce herself. She can do it a lot better than me.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for having me. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there with you in person. When I told my husband that I was going to cross the mountain range and drive 14 hours by myself in the snow, he was not thrilled. And then that was after my traveling companion dropped out because her husband was not thrilled. And so thank you to Lori and to everybody for setting up the Zoom and allowing me to do this virtually. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to talk to you all today. Anybody who's ever hung out with me knows that I'm kind of famous for my t-shirts. And when Lori asked me to do this, I went and I bought a new t-shirt. I don't know if you guys can see, but it's "This is why we can't have nice things." So for the gal that's running for the House of Representatives, I'm rooting for you. So who am I? So I'm the co-founder of the U.S. Election Integrity Plan, which started here in Colorado in November of 2020. My background is in mass communication. I have a journalism degree, a long history with the news media, and I spent 20 years in corporate America writing executive communications and doing large-scale change management efforts. So after the 2020 election, like most people, I knew that something wasn't right. I had to get into the street the Saturday after the November 7th, which was the day that they announced Joe Biden officially as the winner of the election. Went and protested at the Capitol, met some other people that were just as angry as I was. And we, met on November 14th the following weekend, November 21st the following weekend. We rallied and marched from the Denver Capitol up and down 16th Street Mall and back to the Denver Capitol every Saturday between Election Day and Inauguration Day. In the middle of that, we realized that we had a pretty unique set of skills among us and that we needed to get more organized. And so we started the U.S. Election Integrity Plan the week of November 21st, 2020. A couple weeks later, we got the legislative audit hearing for a hearing in the Capitol in the Legislative Audit Committee to hear evidence about a forensic audit of the Colorado 2020 election. So we prepared, we had our evidence, we had our experts, we had lots of information. We went to the hearing in good faith. It was scheduled for 2 hours. It went for 8, I believe. The first 6 of those hours were people testifying on behalf of the Secretary of State and on behalf of the system. So by the time that the Secretary of State's testimony and all of her witnesses and all of her stuff was done, we were able to present our evidence. The news media was gone. Many of the legislators had already left the building or dropped off the Zoom. And so we were essentially presenting to an empty room. That was where I met Sean Smith, Colonel Sean Smith, for the first time. We had several of the people who were set to testify told that there was no time to testify. Remember, this was an audit hearing for us to be able to show anomalies, and we're going to talk about some of the anomalies. I've asked Data Jeff to join me today so we could speak specifically about Montezuma County data in the 2020 election, and we're going to do that. But it was a joke. And so we learned really quickly that the triple communist majority in Denver doesn't want anything to do with election fraud. We hear that 50 cases on election fraud have been dismissed. They've never been heard. We've never been able to present the evidence of election fraud in a court of law, and we have a lot of evidence of election fraud. So let's go back to the beginning, to 2016. The second Trump came down the escalator, he was attacked, set up. As soon as he was elected, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. We know now that that's not true, right? But they gaslit us for 4 years about Russian disinformation. Then we had the summer of burn, loot, and murder, where there was an absolute, I don't know how often you guys get to Denver, but Denver is a captured city now. I used to work in Denver. I worked by Coors Field, loved it. It was my beautiful, artistic, amazing city. Loved bringing my kids there, loved going to ball games, museums. You can't go there anymore. It's covered in graffiti. Everything's boarded up. Very dangerous place to be. I've been followed. My son and I were followed by Antifa, spit on, followed to our car, just being in, that's what it's like to be in Denver these days. So we had that as the lead up to the 2020 election. And it's important because, you know, if you read the local Colorado news, if you've ever heard about me from the mainstream media or from the Colorado media, then you've heard that I'm a terrorist. You've heard that I am, they put us on lists, numbered lists. They called me the fifth most dangerous election denier in Colorado. Colonel Sean Smith is number one. Sharona Bishop, if you know America's Mom, Sharona Bishop, she's number 4. Tina Peters is on there. But they have immediately attacked us. So I'm sure everybody has heard that Tina Peters spent the night in jail last night. She's still in jail at this moment. Interestingly, side note, Eric Coomer, who is the architect of the fraudulent Dominion voting systems, ran his car into a building after having a minimum suspicion of drunk driving, multiple drunk driving convictions in the past. He was let go and given a $250 fine, but Tina Peters, who has never been convicted of a crime, and there's really no evidence that she has done anything wrong, spent the night in jail last night. That's the imbalance that we're dealing with in our justice system with the triple majority communists that we have in Denver. So that's the landscape for the 2020 election. It was a stolen election for 4 years. He was a fraudulent president. It was orange man bad. Everything that he tried to do was challenged, was obstructed. Even with all of that opposition, we still got the results that we got out of the Trump administration, which was pretty incredible. But it was not easily won, right? Those wins were not easily won because we were fought at every turn. So going now to the current administration, anybody who questions the election is a terrorist, is a crazy conspiracy theorist at best, terrorist at probably worse. We had, and this goes back to the media and the media's role in this. If you remember in the lead up to the election, we had a lot of COVID, we had a lot of Black Lives Matter and racial justice. And then we were going up to talking about the election. They started censoring about halfway through 2020. You couldn't say certain things, wrong think, you were guilty of wrong think, misinformation, disinformation. We had warning labels all of a sudden being slapped on content. Fact checkers, right? We had, like, the Trump administration really brought fact checkers into the forefront as a tactic used. We didn't really have fact checkers until people started questioning the narrative, but here we are. Suspensions, deplatforming, these are all norms now. It's normal as a conservative to be deplatformed. It's normal to be silenced. It's normal to be told that you're a conspiracy theorist. And that's okay. We saw, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this in a group of Republicans, but Christy Burton Brown yesterday came out and practically condemned Tina Peters. It's guilty until proven innocent now in the Colorado state level GOP. And that's really interesting to me because the Republican establishment pick seems to be Pam Anderson. Does anybody know who Pam Anderson is? I see a couple heads nodding. So Pam Anderson was the Arapahoe County Clerk and Recorder. At the time of the 2020 election, she was the head of the Colorado County Clerk and Recorders Association. And she currently sits as the executive director of Mark Zuckerberg's Center for Tech and Civic Life. If anybody has followed election-related news, you know that Center for Tech and Civic Life, or CTCL, is a big part of how our election was stolen. They flooded money into swing states, into swing counties, really. And the Gableman report that just came out of Wisconsin, Gableman is a retired judge who was appointed as special counsel to look into election anomalies in Wisconsin. And he came out and recommended decertification. And a big part of that case was Center for Tech and Civic Life. That's Pam Anderson. So the Colorado GOP and the establishment in Colorado, they're working hand in hand. And I'm not talking about your county level GOP, right? I'm talking about the state level establishment GOP. They're working hand in hand, and they're teeing up a choice for you for Secretary of State this year between Soros and Zuckerberg. We know that Jenna Griswold is funded by George Soros. We know that a lot of the press in Colorado is funded by George Soros via Arabella Advisors, via Mark Elias, via all their shell companies and the way that they move money around. But they're teeing up a choice for Republican voters to vote for Zuckerberg. That's where the Colorado GOP is. So the demonization that's happening with Tina Peters and the overwhelming 7 felony charges, I think 10 charges overall that Tina had, making an example out of a Gold Star mother, a cancer survivor, hero public servant that just did her job. She never did anything wrong. She never broke the law. And she certainly hasn't been convicted of a crime, but it doesn't really matter anymore in the media because they demonized Tina Peters before she was ever even charged. So she was just recently charged with a crime. In August of 2021 at the Cyber Symposium, the narrative in Colorado and among a lot of Republican leaders in Colorado was to distance themselves from Tina Peters. The narrative in Colorado that Tina Peters leaked passwords originally was the claim. And then we now hear making unauthorized backups and messing with election systems because she didn't leak passwords. It's all been a lie. Everything that they've said about her has been a lie. But they had to get in front of the evidence that she had. Tina Peters has a forensic image of the systems, the Dominion systems in Mesa County before the trusted build. That's another fun word, trusted build. We know from the first image report that came out of Mesa County that 29,000 files were deleted. We know from the second report what those files were. They were log files, they're election-related data. We have, and you'll notice that before any of that was able to come out, the hard, full court press on Tina Peters as endangering our democracy, right? And all she did was back up records. That's it. That's all she did. She took a copy. They don't want her to have that copy, right? Because the copy shows what they did. And what they did, because we took an image after, because Tina Peters and the team that she worked with took an image after the trusted build update, they're able to compare them. And that is what all the hysteria from the Secretary of State and all of her surrogates and all of the power structures that pull her puppet strings, that's what it's about. We've never, just like we've never been allowed to show the evidence of election fraud in a court, it always gets dismissed on standing or whatnot. We've never been able to show the evidence. We've never been able to show the evidence of the Mesa images. Instead, they paint a narrative. They say Tina Peters broke the law. She leaked passwords. Oh no, she didn't leak passwords. She made an unauthorized backup. Authorized by whom? She didn't violate any statutes. She didn't. I'm solid on this. I've done my research. But they have to create the narrative because they want to. Don't look at the reports. Look at Tina. Right? It's don't look at the evidence. Don't look at the analysis. Don't look at what we've shown. There's a back door. That's in Mesa report too. There's a back door in the election systems in the Dominion code. And what it really shows is that the code isn't a mistake. It's not a hack. It's not an error. What happened is they designed the machines and the code to do this. They designed it to delete election data that is required by federal law to be retained for 22 months and by Colorado law to be retained for 25 months. They had to wipe it because we know what they did. And now we have evidence. And we've recently found out in the Hanks versus Griswold case that another clerk and recorder out of Elbert County also took a forensic image. So we'll be able to compare and see if what we see in the Mesa images also shows up in the Elbert County images. They don't want us to do that. They don't want the truth to come out. And so we get narrative and we get smears and we get slanders. And what they've done to Tina Peters is absolute. It's trash. It's garbage, and they're not going to get away with it. So back to the U.S. election integrity plan, because I do want to give Jeff time to speak, and I definitely want to have time for questions. So we had so much gaslighting and so much narrative. They accuse us of misinformation and disinformation, but they never say anything that's true. They have repeatedly, while we were all watching the summer of burn, loot, and murder, while we were arguing about COVID, while it was don't wear a mask, no, do wear a mask, no, wear 2 masks, 3 masks, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we're going to slow the spread. Now everybody has to get vaccinated or you're going to get fired. While all of that was going on before the 2020 election, the state legislatures around the country and other jurisdictions were quietly changing election laws or quietly making changes outside of election laws, and that's what's going to get a lot of them caught. We didn't have to do that in Colorado because we have the gold standard of fraud. They've been baking this system for a long time, and they cheat in a lot of different ways. And it's brilliant, really, when you think about it, because when we say they cheat in all these different ways and they're using all these different things, we sound like crazy people. Right? To normal people who aren't elections nerds and who don't really watch the news, and people who don't even really vote, it's crazy. It's crazy talk. There's no, but we just went through 4 years of hearing how the election was stolen. We saw the Kill Chain documentary. We heard Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren talk to us about how machines could be hacked, but then all of a sudden that went away. You could ask why. Both of those were presidential candidates in 2020. So we have been having so much gaslighting for so long, but this isn't new. When I told you I went to journalism school, when I applied for journalism school in 1995, so before social media, before we all really had mainstream internet, right? It was dial-up, there was no high speed. We still used a card catalog to look things up. In 1995, I wrote my journalism school entrance essay on how headline news would be the downfall of the informed American population. Because once you convince people that they have the story and the facts from a headline, whoever writes the headlines controls reality. If you remember headline news, it was 30-minute loops. They loop the news and you'd get all the headlines that you needed to know in a 30-minute segment. You could watch it at any point in the day and you'd be up to speed. It was largely accurate. I hypothesized, I don't know, I was young, but I hypothesized that it was largely accurate back then because they were conditioning us. They were conditioning us for shorter attention spans, and they were conditioning us to no longer pay attention, and people no longer pay attention. People don't read anymore. Now it's all headlines. It's 140 character social posts. And that's a big part of what we have to take back. So I love hearing your, the business in your meeting and hearing the candidates that are fed up and getting in the race, because that's how we win this. Jeff and I and our teams were told all the time, asked all the time, what can we do? We have to do something. When people especially first wake up to the tyranny in Colorado and around the country, what can we do? We have to do something. The number one thing to do is get involved locally. It's get involved in your county, get involved in your city, take those seats. One of the things that the Republican Party establishment did not expect this year is the precinct strategy. They like keeping those seats empty because it gives them more control. They have the people they can control. They don't advertise those seats. It's very hard to find the schedules in the seats, at least in my county, in Douglas it was. This year, overwhelmingly in many counties, I don't know how it's gone. I heard you have your county assembly tomorrow. I don't know how your caucus went, but in many counties in the Front Range, all those seats are full. They're full to 100%, and they're filled largely with conservatives who are fed up. That's how you take your party back. That's how you take it back. So getting involved locally is the most important thing, but also having your eyes wide open and know what's going on. Read beyond the headline. Understand where the news is coming. Understand who pays for the news that you're reading. there's a publication, I use that term very lightly, called Colorado Newsline. And the editor-in-chief there is a guy named Quentin Young, and they are funded by Jenna Griswold's council, but they parade as news, and they go out and they put all sorts of things out there about anybody who questions election fraud, about anybody who questions COVID mandates, about anybody who says anything bad about vaccines or critical race theory or Afghanistan or truckers or anything else that we're not allowed to talk about anymore in America, where we have the First Amendment. This is the landscape now. It's not news. Just because it looks like news doesn't make it news. And the reality is, none of it's news. It's all propaganda at this point. We're at a point now where the narrative, it trumps the truth every time for the establishment at large. So become informed. I mean, you guys are all in the room, so I'm sure you guys are the ones who are informed. Go shake your neighbors and wake them up and get them involved. It's going to take every single one of us. And, you know, one of the things that we've, and I promise I'm going to hand it over to Data Jeff to actually give you guys some actionable insights here about Montezuma County. But one of the things that we have been running up against as we've been doing this since November of 2020 and trying to educate people, including elected officials at the clerk level, at the county commissioner level, as we've been trying to educate people, we get overwhelmingly, well, not here. Sure, in Denver County or in Boulder or in Vail, they might have cheated, but not here. It's red here. We know our clerk is great. They would never cheat. They didn't. This doesn't happen with the local officials. It's not all the clerks and commissioners that are in on it, but they've been misled. And so the clerk structure that we have is that they are set up with the accountability in the state of Colorado. The clerk has the accountability of oversight of the elections. They have no visibility into the coding of the machines, the trusted build. They don't have the skill set to know. And in Tina Peters' case, when you bring in an outside consultant to help you in an area where you don't know, they end up demonizing her for it. It is built on a pinky promise of trust with Jenna Griswold and her office, and Jenna Griswold's office is outsourced to Dominion. So that's what you need to realize that we're dealing with. The approach to the clerks is not, we know you cheated, you did something wrong. We know they didn't. Largely, we know that the local officials who are just doing their jobs and are trying to provide free and fair elections, they didn't. But they're following the written procedures, and they're following the playbook, and they're listening to both the Secretary of State's office, and they're listening to the Colorado County Clerks Association, which is the private arm of the Secretary of State office. And so you need to realize that we're up against an establishment that's big in Colorado. It is so ingrained at every level. There's been years upon years of grooming, and we've been gaslit about our elections. They keep saying we have the gold standard of elections in Colorado. And if anybody has watched Sean Smith speak, you know that's not true, because he's actually done the work and has the receipts. And so, and if you haven't heard Sean Smith speak, I would encourage everybody to go to, on YouTube, go to the cultural impact team of the Church for All Nations. He spoke there last night, excellent presentation, and really goes through not just what the problems are, but what the solutions are. So as a part of USEIP, we, as I mentioned, we marched, we've gone after legislative hearings, and we've done a lot of those kinds of activities. We've also analyzed. And so I'm really honored to be able to have brought with me and introduce. I'm glad to see that there's guys in the room of the Republican Women of Montezuma County, because I was like a little leery about bringing my own dude with me, but I brought Data Jeff to talk about. So Data Jeff is, he's been with us for almost a year now in USEIP. He built our data and analytics team. He is the architect of Colorado canvassing methodology, statistical sampling methodology. He's absolutely brilliant, and he has brought Montezuma County specific data to share with you all today. So Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, I hope I can follow Ashe. She's quite the speaker. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. Everybody can hear
I
me?
hear you. Yep.
All right. So as Ash had mentioned, my name is Jeff. I started with USEIP last year. It was after the election. Everybody saw what happened. So don't ever let people gaslight you and tell you zero evidence, no fraud, all that BS. Don't let them gaslight you. We all know what we saw.
Jeff, your
in
video
that
is
election.
off.
All right, sorry, is that better? I've got my Cody Jinks hat on here. My favorite artist.
Yep.
It's cold in my basement. So don't let them gaslight you. We all know what we saw, every single one of us. And the reason that I joined USEIP is because I started digging into Colorado's data, and what I found made me say, we have got to canvass. We have got to show these problems are not just data anomalies. These anomalies are actual problems. Right, and can everybody see my screen? All right. So I'm going to take you through Montezuma's data. There is some interesting things you guys may want to know after this presentation. I always like to start with the Colorado Constitution. This is something that Colonel Smith brought up because obviously the Constitution overrides statute any day of the week, overrides any of the ridiculous rules and regulations that Jenna Griswold decides to make on any given day. And I just want to read this because it is powerful, and I hope everybody remembers this when they leave today. All political power is vested in and derived from the people. All government of right originates from the people, founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. Powerful words, something we all need to remember. Elections belong to the people. They do not belong to Jenna Griswold. They do not belong to George Soros. They do not belong to Mark Zuckerberg, CTCL, or Pam Anderson. I want to start with SCORE. What is SCORE? SCORE is the statewide Colorado voter registration and election system. What does it do? It houses all of the voter registration information for all of Colorado. Every county, every voter is in this centralized database. It's the source of truth about who can and can't vote, who's an eligible voter, who's a legitimate voter, who's not. But there's problems with SCORE. The first problem is it's a centralized database, and Colonel Smith will tell you this every single time. Anytime you centralize power, centralize data, centralize information, it is open to being hacked. It is open to being manipulated. The other thing is there are known vulnerabilities with Colorado's registration system that were not previously disclosed by the public, but there was a Red Hat hacker conference where they specifically went to hack SCORE, and they found 7 vulnerabilities. Has anybody heard about this? Probably not, because the Secretary of State didn't want you to know about this. So they found 7 vulnerabilities with SCORE, with our central registration system. So earlier last year, some real smart person decided to Quora request all the IP addresses that had accessed SCORE, the centralized voter registration system. The state did give information back, and what we found was quite astounding. These are all the computers that have been accessing our registration database directly, just from North America. Some of these states aren't even part of ERIC, and I'll get into ERIC here in a second, but some of these states have no business accessing our registration database directly. And when I say access directly, I mean these are people you have to have credentials to access SCORE. Typically, it's accessed by workers or people that work for the state. But a lot of people accessing a registration system that has 7 major known vulnerabilities.
And Jeff,
That's not all.
just to be clear on that, SCORE is just a Colorado system.
Yes. SCORE is the Colorado voter registration system. So each one of these dots represents a computer directly accessing Colorado's registration system. And where you see it heavy, that means there's multiple computers in that area accessing Colorado's registration system. So the question then becomes, why are they accessing Colorado's registration system? But not to be outdone, we also found foreign IP addresses from Brazil, Zimbabwe, Germany. So not only do we have domestic IPs accessing Colorado's registration system, we also now have foreign IP addresses accessing Colorado's registration system.
And this information was obtained from open records. This is legitimate information, Colorado's open records that this came from.
Yeah, Colorado Open Record Access. So CORA is the Freedom of Information Act specifically for Colorado. So we call it CORA. These are all the IP addresses from the Secretary of State based on that Freedom of Information Act. So now that we know about SCORE, we know the vulnerabilities, we see who's accessing it. What else do we need to know about our registration system? Well, we need to know about ERIC. And many people may have heard about ERIC because Louisiana decided that they're going to pull out. Now they have other states looking to pull out of ERIC. But what is ERIC? ERIC is the Election Registration Information Center. It's a nonprofit organization started by Pew Research. Now, if anybody knows about them, they are also Soros funded. David Becker, who helped to start it, is Soros funded. And what happened? How did we end up with ERIC? Well, initially we had Kansas Crosscheck, but that got shut down because the ACLU sued because of voter suppression or whatever other BS they decided they want to come up with. So Kansas Crosscheck got shut down. And what was the replacement for Kansas Crosscheck? ERIC. Why ERIC isn't sued by the ACLU, but Kansas Crosscheck was, your guess is as good as mine.
Because ERIC has fewer controls.
Right. So ERIC's sole mission statement, if you look on their website, you can go to ericstates.org. You can go onto their website. Their sole mission statement is assisting states to improve the accuracy of America's voter rolls and increase. So this word increase is going to come into play here in a bit. Increase access to voter registration for all eligible citizens. So ERIC basically sends reports to the states and says, these are the voters that should be on your system. They also provide a nifty service. What is that service? Here are people that you don't have on there, but you should, right? ERIC is telling the states who should be on their rolls. I guess I don't see a problem here. You guys see a problem? Because I don't know, I'm not sure. So we have yet to get any information about how the states confirm what ERIC tells them are eligible voters. We have no clue about this. So what's the result? We've got a known registration system with vulnerabilities that has been accessed by foreign and domestic IP addresses, right? We also have ERIC telling voters and telling states which voters are legitimate voters. So what does this lead to? Well, in Montezuma, it leads to this graph. Now I'm going to explain this graph. The red line below here, this is your actual voting population, not just population, this is important, voting population growth in Montezuma County since 2016. It's been relatively low, right, under 5%. This blue line represents the growth in your voter rolls, so the voter registration system. And you can see before each election, there's a huge growth, and then they cull it. Every election, a huge growth, and then they cull it. And in fact, in 2018, they culled it so much, they actually took it to pre-2016 levels. How many of these voters impacted your guys' elections, your local issues? Think about school boards that you're like, how did they get elected? Wait, how did this issue pass? Everybody I talked to voted against this. How does that work? Well, this is the combination of insecure registration, foreign and domestic addresses, and also ERIC. And you can also see here in 2020, thanks to automatic voter registration, you guys have plenty of voters now in Montezuma County. I know that was a problem before, but man, you guys really got it now. So the question here is, how is this possible? How is it that your voter rolls can grow at double, triple the population growth? Good question. Now you might want to ask your clerk. I guess they're getting out the vote a lot. So if we look at the yearly change, so this is the yearly change in voting population. So you can see in 2016, people left Montezuma County, people came to Montezuma County. In total, you added 259 voters. Then in 2017, this is from the Colorado Demography Office. 2017, 134 voters. 2018, 85 voter net change. 93, 195. Adds up to, out of all these years, Montezuma added 766 voters to their voting population. 766. So what does that look like when you break it down by affiliation? So the Democrat affiliation dropped by 330 voters. So half of what was added, also half of that was a decrease from the Democrat affiliation. You see Republican affiliation stayed about neutral. It added about 19. But here's the big one, these unaffiliated voters. Almost 1,500 voters were added since 2016 that were marked unaffiliated. And you see that the other, your independents, libertarians, so on, only added 32. So what does this mean? So the total change was over 1,000 voters added to the rolls in Montezuma. The population change was only 766. Where did these other 500 voters come from? Don't know. But that increase in the unaffiliated is by itself more than the entire voting population in Montezuma County. So here's another nifty graph. Some of you might recognize this. This is very similar to what Dr. Frank has done when he looked at registration rates versus the population versus people that actually voted. And there's a couple items I want to note here, and I'm going to note them in green. These areas, so the blue line represents your registration rolls. The black line represents the voting population based on the Colorado Demography Office. And if anybody notices here, you can see certain age groups, there's actually more registered voters than the Colorado Demography Office says should actually live in Montezuma County. So between the ages of 22 and 44 and over 60, there are more voters on the rolls in those age brackets than what the census would suggest should actually be there in Montezuma County. And again, this is from the Colorado's Demography Office. So that's important because Montezuma County has a hand in those population estimates. So even Montezuma County didn't know these voters were there. The other weird anomaly I saw with Montezuma County, Biden became really popular apparently compared to Hillary Clinton. We can see this because he received 47% more votes than Hillary Clinton had in 2016. The issue here that we know is that on the previous slide, we saw 330 Democrats changing their affiliation. Okay, that's interesting. Why was Biden so popular? Well, I think I know. Actually, it was all those Biden vote. You remember all the vote parades? Yeah, it was all those Biden vote parades. That's what it was. Yeah, you know what? Pepperidge Farms doesn't remember that either. What really happened? This is what really happened. Everybody remembers this. This goes back to do not let them gaslight you. You all know what you saw leading up to the election. You all know what you saw during the election, and you all know what you've seen since. So I want to summarize here. There are red flag warnings for Montezuma. Your voter roll growth far exceeds your population growth. Huge red flag. More registered voters than what your county says should even live there for ages 22 to 40 and over 60. And the increase in Biden votes versus what Clinton got in 2016, it doesn't comport with that slide we saw with the party affiliation changes. But where did these votes come from? These are a lot of the questions that I had and that I have now after researching Montezuma's data. So what it leads me to believe is that Colorado is the gold standard.
Thank you, Jeff. So, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, so what do we do, right? And unfortunately, we have 5 minutes. So what I would recommend is to watch the Cultural Impact Team. So it's Church for All Nations, Cultural Impact Team. It's on YouTube. It was there last night. I'll get Lori the link to that as well so that she can send it out to all of you. But I would watch that because that gets into solutioning. A big part is the first step is always recognizing you have a problem, right? So that's really where we're focused today is, don't let them gaslight you. Understand with your eyes wide open what's really going on, because that's how we're going to win, and then shake your neighbors awake. With that, Lori or whomever would be happy to take questions until, I know you guys said you like to end at 1, but we're here for you. So
I can walk around. Does anyone have a question to either Jeff or Ashe? Lori?
Thank you. How'd you get away? Oh, there it goes. Thank you so much. This was really, really incredible. I talked to somebody like a week ago about going to caucus and voting, and basically he said, the Biden won. I said, you mean you got 85 million votes? He goes, yeah. And I said, no. I said, there's lots of evidence. Well, I don't believe any of that stuff. I said, but there's data. Because they can make up all the data they want. Okay, I was dumbfounded. I knew what else to say. I said, no, there's real data. Well, anybody can make any numbers up they want to. How do you answer the question or statement?
yeah, my answer would be all of our data comes directly from the official government sources. But Jeff, go ahead. Looks like you're on mute, but.
Am I still on mute?
No.
Okay. So all the data that I just presented comes from public sources, either the Colorado Secretary of State registration data or the Colorado Secretary of State website. It's all from the Colorado Secretary of State. All of my data is open source. Anybody that wants it, anybody that wants the code that generated it is free game. I give it freely to anybody that wants it. So I'm more than happy to give it to anybody that wants the Montezuma County data and the code that created all of this, because it's all from the Secretary of State.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much for this presentation today. And you can't believe how timely this is, because I actually arrived today with my voter registration rolls from when I was trying to become a precinctman in my precinct. One of the things, so this is all voters, unaffiliated, it's everybody. And one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when I started working on this about 6 weeks ago was that all of the inactives, and some people are permanently inactive and they're still on here. And so we've launched a little bit of a campaign here to try to get these roles back to where they need to be and get these inactives off, because I know that's one of the ways that they're just manipulating this thing, is by adding and subtracting inactives where they need to. And we're getting stonewalled everywhere we go with this. So do you have anything that can help us figure out how we can get these voter rolls to actually reflect what should be here?
So when, if we had time to get into the Built for Integrity solution, we talk a lot about voter rolls. Voter rolls are, because we have e-poll books and we have SCORE and we use ERIC, and all of our voter rolls are digitized and centralized at the Secretary of State's office, Secretary of State level, statewide level. You can clean them, but they could be corrupted in a millisecond again. So the answer for free and fair elections with voter rolls is to decentralize them. It's to bring it back to the county level, to take the county power back. That's a long game. It will require us to have legislative changes. It will require all of us to kind of get on the same page, and we're pushing for that. We're pushing for it across the country, but certainly in Colorado. So, when you looked at Jeff's wave chart, right, we call that the wave chart, where you see the buildup of the rolls and then you see the culling. What I find really interesting about that is it's very hard to get off of our voter rolls. We have affidavits from people who moved, went in, canceled their voter registration because they moved to a different state. Their mother still got a ballot for them. She destroyed it, and that person still voted. This happens all over, right? And so they keep the rolls the way they keep them. That's what the Judicial Watch lawsuit is about. And you will see very soon information about canvassing in Colorado that supports what I'm saying. So the push that we need to be making is to decentralize. You can clean them, but like I said before, the phantom voters aren't being injected by your county clerk or by your commissioners. This is happening systemically, and dirty voter rolls that are inflated like crazy are a big part of how they do it. But we still see them cull it after the election, right? Which in and of itself should be a crime, because that's election records that are required to be retained for 22 and 25 months federally and in Colorado respectively. So there is a lot of don't watch what the other hand is doing that happens with our voter rolls. So it is a noble effort, I believe, to try and clean the voter rolls, but with the way that the system is architected for fraud, I don't believe it will be super effective. Jeff, anything to add on there?
So if we remember back on the slide, I'll pull this back up, of all the IP addresses accessing SCORE, this is why you can remove names, but they're just going to be added right back, either because somebody can go in there and adjust. There's literally three programmatic codes, lines of code via an API that you can make: insert, delete, modify. You can do whatever you want with a voter roll. Those three simple lines, 3 commands, and you can see it here between people being able to access and Eric. You can't keep them clean. And to Ashe's point, those voter rolls need to be back to the precinct level. SCORE should be nothing more than the sum of the tapes of all the precincts that have been cleaned, analyzed by the clerks.
And the only copy of voter rolls that's not at the clerk, the only copy that's not read-only should be at the clerk's office at the county level. Anything else, if we have to roll it up to show it at the statewide level, we have to roll it up, whatever, that should be read-only. They should not be able to modify it outside of the county.
And Eric sure as heck shouldn't be the final arbiter on who should be on our rolls.
I was just wondering, can we sue to get rid of Eric? I mean, that's where all this hacking in and they're getting in access from there. Couldn't we sue to get rid of that? And
so right now, I believe that it's actually not a statute that we use, Eric. It's more of an agreement that the Colorado Secretary of State has. So what we need to do is to pressure the Secretary of State to remove us from Eric, because the Secretary of State has that ability.
And for you guys in Montezuma County, you do that at the county level. You start with pressuring the clerk and the commissioners. The commissioners have a ton of power over our elections because they fund them at the county level. There's a lot of decentralization that already exists, but a lot of the administration is centralized, so we don't realize how much power that we have. So we have materials that are coming out through USCIP to mount pressure campaigns for a lot of these different areas for kind of the entire elections built for integrity framework that we've proposed, and that you'll see in the Sean Smith video, and we can share some materials on that as well with the team there. But it's important to remember that this is it's an entire system, an ecosystem that is architected for fraud, and there's fraud at multiple levels of it. The things that they've asked us, that the ways that we fought election fraud in the past with cleaning voter rolls, with going after the onesie and twosie things that we can find, ignores the real problem, and that's part of why they do it. Sean Smith says voter fraud is not scalable. It's not that's not something that you're going to steal elections with. That's individual. Election fraud is how you steal elections, and it's systemic, and it's built into the code, and it's supported by processes and bad actors all over the nation. The third party ecosystem that surrounds our elections, this all came up after the 2002 HAVA Act. The HAVA Act injected a ton of money into elections and built an entire industry of election providers like Runback and Dominion and ES&S and all of the others, Hart, InterCivic. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think that they found that selling the seats is more effective than selling the software. And that's how we find ourselves here right now.
And Colorado plays a unique role in that we have Matt Crane, who is affiliated. We have Wayne Williams, Runback salesman, right? Former Secretary of State. Pam Anderson, former clerk. Also, the director of CTCL, who helped to figure out where does that $350 million go, right? All the states, she was there when that happened. So Colorado apparently has a very unique spot in this system, in this industry.
And I would add that election fraud is the most bipartisan issue we have in America. They are both sides in it. Two secretaries of state brought the gold standard system to Colorado. Scott Gessler did a 3-year investigation of bringing technologies in, decided on recommending a couple of vendors, teed it up for Wayne Williams, who Jeff mentioned, to come in and put the system in place. Wayne Williams is a senior advisor to Runback, which is an elections provider. Wayne Williams mandated the use of Dominion in Colorado, and Douglas County and Garfield County sued and are able to use Clear Ballot. The reality is it doesn't matter. The machines have the same code and they're built for fraud. But the Republicans, like Jeff mentioned again, Pam Anderson, she's listed as a Republican. She was the head of the CCCA. She was a Republican elected clerk and recorder. She is taking money from Zuckerberg to steal elections, to impact elections. That is my opinion, because I have to say that. But so I would, let's not, we can no longer have blind trust, right? And while we battle a lot about, Democrat or Republican, and, people in general at large vote, whether it's an R or a D next to the name, we need to start looking. Like I love hearing grassroots candidates in the room talking about, what you're going to do when you get in. We need to start electing grassroots candidates, because the Republican Party of Colorado wants us to elect Pam Anderson. And that tees up a choice for us of Soros versus Zuckerberg. And we don't want either for our Secretary of State. Right? We want somebody who wants the job for the right reason, is going to do the work of the people of Colorado. We don't need any more big money, big tech, big international philanthropists engaged in our self-governance. This is about self-governance. Elections belong to the people, as Jeff said. That is constitutional, both US and Colorado, and it's time we take it back.
And the question here goes, is shaken. I have a question there.
Hi, my name is Christy Wells, and I say my name kind of hesitantly because I've got two questions. The first one is, in the last election, I had a feeling something horrible was gonna happen. So I secretly, and I'm looking at you guys, I secretly joined a bunch of Democrat. I set up a fake name on Facebook and joined a bunch of their secret Democratic groups. They're evil, I'm gonna tell you that right now, okay? And they specifically, one of their big things is to have people running that are actually Democrats, that have changed their affiliate to Republican. It might have taken them a few years to get reestablished as a Republican, but they're in there and they are taking over. That's their goal, is to take us over. They really hate Montezuma County because we still stand up for them. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I signed up to be a judge at the county for the election. What good is that going to do if this all happens before the election ever even starts? And how can we fight that?
So showing up to be a judge is great. I actually believe that everybody should vote in person on election day. When you vote in person on election day and you don't bring your mail-in ballot with you, you have to show ID. So you've got in person on election day voting, showing ID. If you show up and they say, oh, I'm sorry, you already voted, and you have your mail-in ballot in the car, then you call the press and you call the police, because there's no universe in which you should have already voted if you have your mail-in ballot and you're showing up in person. That's behaviorally how we can impact. Poll judges, when you're there, you can see if anything is going on. Again, I don't think any of us hypothesize that all of the clerks are deeply in on this, but we do believe the clerks have been misled. So having eyes on is important. It won't catch all the fraud. You're absolutely right on that, because this is, a lot of this is in the code, right? But if there are, areas where windows get blocked out while they're counting, or suitcases of ballots get pulled out from under tables, you'll see that as a judge, unless they fake a water main break and kick you out. But then that in and of itself, you call the police and you call the media. So that's the biggest thing, is we cannot abandon the battlefield of elections, right? And so that's one thing we hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to vote because it's all rigged and it's fraudulent. Well, one thing we know for certain is that turnout breaks their algorithm. That's why they had to stop in the middle of the night. It's why they had to spread the fraud across 5 states. Draza Smith is brilliant, engineer and mathematician, statistician, and she has hypothesized and I think proven that Florida broke their algorithm. DeSantis made them report by 11 o'clock at night. And because of that, they weren't able to pull what they pulled in other areas. But because Florida has 29 electoral votes, they had to spread that out all over the country. And that's why we saw the same sources of methods in 5 states. Turnout impacts their ability to cheat. It breaks their algorithm. So we show up. You don't show up by voting early, and you don't show up by mailing your vote in. You show up on election day in person, and you show your ID. You can use your mail-in ballot to figure out what you're going to do. Don't bring it in with you, because they might make you vote on it, right? What you want to do is have them print you out a ballot, you show your ID for it, and you vote in person on election day. Not a day early, not a week early. You're telling them the margin if you do that, right? This is now it's a battlefield in this culture war, in this communist insurrection that we're all dealing with right now. Elections are one of the most important battlefields, and we cannot abandon it. So showing up, being a judge, being a poll worker, even if you just show up and vote in person on election day and show your ID, it's one of the most powerful things that you can do. The other is, to your second question about how can we fight it, it's get involved locally. And you've signed up to be a poll judge. Many of you are delegates or precinct leaders. Some of you are candidates. That's it. That's the ticket. Everybody needs to get involved, and you need to not be afraid to speak out. The only reason that they put me on a numbered list and call me a dangerous person in the state of Colorado is because I have a big mouth. That's it. It's because I will not take it. I will not listen to their communism. I will not listen to them gaslight me. I will not let them lie to me. I am a critical thinking adult and I'm not buying it anymore. And that's what we all need to get bold enough to be able to have the conversations with our neighbors, have the conversations with whomever. Don't be afraid to talk to an elected official. Don't be afraid to stand in those. They work for you. We pay their salaries. And I don't know if you guys saw, but the DC swamp Congress that we have, which is also fully captured, passed $1 trillion omnibus bill to give money to Ukraine in the middle of the night. This is taxation without representation. It's abject tyranny. And Denver is the test ground for it. Colorado, they've been doing this for 20 years. They've been putting this plan in place to take down America and take us over, to bring about the globalist Great Reset agenda that they're all pushing. That's what this is. We're watching it happen. The World War III that's playing out over in the land of Gog right now is it's the Great Reset. They want to tank our country. They want to tank our economy. They want to enslave all of us. And they're doing it right in front of our eyes. So stand up, get in the fight, and don't be afraid to use your voice.
And just to second that, your participation is the difference between the Great Reset and the Great Awakening.
That's right.
Okay, I know that we've talked about among us here too, is trying to approach the commissioners, our county commissioners, with data. We need to show them data. That's why I kind of need that stuff in paper or something. But we can go to our county commissioners and our county clerk, and show them these things. Our county clerk believes that everything is fine and nothing happened. And she probably believes that, and that's probably true in her point, but she doesn't know what's going on in the machines and behind her back. So we need ways to be able to point this stuff to her, so we can convince her otherwise. We need to convince her otherwise.
And one of the things there, just if I could respond to that, because one of the things that's real important, and I think is a visible example that all of us can see with our own eyes, is what happened to Tina Peters is what happens when you stand up to Jenna Griswold. That's what's and that can't happen if we all stand up. Right? Jenna Griswold freaked out when she found out there was a second image in Elbert County. And then she thought that there was one in Douglas County, and she freaked out even harder, right? Because they don't want this coming out. And this ends when we stand up. This ends when we say no to the tyranny and we take our power back.
Absolutely. So we probably advance some of the questions because we're probably over time now, although I could go on forever, but you know. No other questions? Okay, we can have ways, you know, links or whatever, so we can get this on paper, would be awesome. And yeah, and we can get stuff with their emails, Ashe's email, that kind of thing. Becky Super will send it out to everybody who's been here, so they got connections, and see John Smith and that kind of thing. And this is awesome, y'all. I don't know what y'all think, but this is awesome. Amigo, you got something to say?
I just wanted to say that if we don't have your email, please the table. Please leave it with Fran at the table, and we'll make sure any information we get from that, we'll forward it on.
Okay, so we're going to say thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. This was awesome. This was so awesome.
Thank you so much for having us. We're honored to spend some time with you guys during your lunch hour. Appreciate it.
Bunches. Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we adjourn. Is that what we're going to do? We adjourn. Thank you all for coming. Please. We both, I second it. If y'all make sure we have your emails, we're gonna try to send emails to keep y'all updated what's going on.